Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Road to Recovery. We have Toriano here from Findlay, Ohio. He is gracious enough to share his story with us today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty great.
Good. So we'll just get started right at the beginning with your childhood. Can you explain what it was like? Did you grow up with both your parents? Did you feel like you fit in? Those kind of things.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, it was just my mother. My mother had a challenge with my sister and I. My father, he left our family quite early. In fact, I never met my father, and so we came up in a real liberal lifestyle. And my mother was really cool. She was my friend, and like oftentimes with your friends, you get high with your friends, you drink with your friends, and so I was introduced to alcohol and marijuana at a very young age, and so as it were.
Do you remember how it made you feel drinking, maybe using drugs with your mom? Did you feel like different, or were you just like hanging out, those kind of things?
Well, like I said, it was normal. It was a normalcy for us, and so there was no way to gauge what different was. It wasn't every day. It was basically recreational, and I think that the progression for my drug use really came from. I think sometimes what goes often unspoken with addiction is the causative nature of it. Why do you turn to drugs? Why do you turn to heavier drugs? And for me, I was just really, unbeknownst at that time, trying to fill this internal void of emptiness. I think that would have been filled by my father had he been present in my life. And I don't think that it helped because I had an uncle in my life, and he was an incredible man, very, very wonderful man, very, very special man to me, and he was like a father. And he died early. And so when he died early, I literally felt like I had been robbed. Something had been snatched out of me, and that's where my real drug use really turned up. I started drinking more, I started smoking more, and then I got introduced into harder drugs, and that association with that relational association that was first lacking in my father, then being supplemented with my uncle, and then now my uncle being taken out of the picture, it was just like, now I'm looking for a comforting environment, a reinforcing environment. And so I found that in my neighborhood with the local gang that was in my neighborhood. And I began fellowship with them, and now here come the harder drugs and the harder activity, and it escalated all the way up until I robbed a drug dealer of a rival gang member and ended up getting involved in a gang shooting.
Wow.
In which that man lost his life. Another man was paralyzed, and I was sent to prison for 20 years, a sentence of 20 to life, of which I spent 30 years in prison. Yeah, 30 years in prison.
So, during this altercation, I guess, were you under the influence, or were you just kind of using every day, and it was just that kind of second nature to you? What were your thoughts, I guess, going into, you were in a gang, so obviously that is, right there, that's trouble, but so I guess what really happened in that traumatic event?
Yeah, well, my thoughts at that time were just literally moment to moment.
Okay.
There was no deep reflection. There was just moment to moment thoughts of masking internal pain and trying not to look back into my past and not attempting to look into a future. I didn't believe there was a future. And the past that I came out of, I didn't want to go back to it. And so the moment, that's all I thought about. And so the drugs really just carried themselves, the momentum of heroin use, of cocaine use, and just literally anything I can get my hands on, PCP, anything that could take the moment that I was in and numb that. And so that was my existence, and I didn't care what I had to do to get the drugs, of course. I didn't care who I had to hurt, who I had to harm. And at the same time, if it also meant that I was representing loyalty for my association, then all the better for that particular time. And so, of course, yes, the drug use, it escalated up into that time and into that moment.
Gotcha. So You were sentenced to prison for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 to life sentence.
Did you get sober in prison?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I just got more and more deeper into drugs because, same drugs that are out here are in prison.
Right.
You can get wherever you want out here, you can get in there. It costs you a little bit more, but it's available. And so I thought that I needed it even more so because in addition to everything that I was feeling now internally, now I have this external situation of being in prison. One of the most violent places on the face of the earth is in confined spaces like prison. And so now I'm really, using drugs, and now I'm really heightened violence. And so my drug addiction just increased until one day my mother, who a year prior to my incarceration, she had given her life over to the Lord Jesus Christ. She had become a Christian. And so she wanted that for my sister and I. And she would just beg and she would just plead for us, just to join her, but it almost seemed hypocritical that you would be in our life so early on in this way, and now when it's time for us to go out into the world to be adults, you want us to now change. Well, no, it's our turn now. That's the mind of a child, first of all, then the mind of a child that's strung out on drugs. So figure that rationale out.
Yeah.
But my mother, she called us, she prayed, and so in prison, as a result of a drug transaction, I was stabbed. I was stabbed and left for dead inside of a prison. And so when I went to the hospital, I realized in that moment that I didn't want to die in prison. I didn't want to die here, not this way. And so I turned to the only place I knew to turn, and that was where my mother was telling me about this man named Jesus. And so that's why I turned my life around. I gave my life to the Lord. And just like my mother, there was a radical change on the inside of who I was. And I found out later on that was a healing that was taking place. And this healing that was taking place inside of me, it subsided my desire, my need for the drugs. Not that I didn't want to get high, but now I felt like I didn't have a reason to get high. Before, I was literally getting high for a cause, and the cause was my own self-numbing, my own self-medication to try to subside this pain and frustration and anxiety that I was feeling that I completely did not understand.
Right.
I didn't even know why I was feeling what I was feeling. I just know that I didn't want to feel that, and I would do anything not to feel it. And so for me to experience now internal healing, I had no reason anymore to self-medicate. So I didn't have a desire to get high. But this was the tricky part, because I think that there's a causative nature that drives people generally, for whatever reason, to get high. Some people deal with abuse, some people deal with sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, abandonment, whatever a person's particular issue may be a causative nature. But then once you get involved in drugs, then it's this addictiveness that just takes over. So even though I didn't have a causative nature to get high anymore, the addictive process of being chemically dependent was still very real.
Right.
And so now here's a struggle, not to get high, because I want to get high, mentally I still want to get high, but emotionally and spiritually I had no cause to anymore. So it made it a lot more easier for me to be receptive to begin to work the steps to recovery. And that's what really helped me, was once those causative issues were healed, I was able to really focus on the steps and the process to healing, because I really wanted it.
Did you do this while you were in prison?
Yes, I did this entire time. I mean, not the entire time, but let me see. I would say the last 12 years of my incarceration was really dedicated to living drug-free and just beginning that process of coming into who it is that I was to be, because I had no clue. It was never instilled inside of me that you're going to be this and you're going to be that. So I had to find myself. Who is it that I am? And then once I found out who I was, how could I be the best person that I can possibly be? And so, yeah, so the last 12 years of my 30-year incarceration was really committed to that. And it was really fast at that point. It was really fast.
So when you were sentenced for 20 years, why did you serve 30?
Well, I went to the parole. So in Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, they have the Adult Parole Authority, and they have what they call the old law and the new law. And so the old law offenders are offenders who were incarcerated prior to 1996. And so prior to 1996, you have to go to the parole board, and they determine if you're suitable for release. And so I went to the parole board 4 times before I got out. The first 3 times I was determined to be unsuitable for release. And so that's what stretched that time out like that. And so you have many, 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 many men and women who are incarcerated in Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections who should be out. You have many who are still going through their process, and they need to still go through a rehabilitative process to come into who they should be. For them to be safe to themselves and others. But you have so many that are ready to get out and just being held back for the most ridiculous of reasons. Yeah, that's a whole nother
terrible,
issue. Yes,
right?
it's tragic.
That really is. So, being in prison most of your adult life, right?
Yeah.
How did you integrate back into society after all that time?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. And so the integration really begins while you're still incarcerated. A saying that I used to always say to myself was, before you can become free, you first have to become free. And so there's an internal freedom that has to take place, because you figure it this way, that when you're in prison, it's a good thing to become institutionalized, because you need internal constructs mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to help you to not only survive, but to also thrive in an environment that's institutional. But once you're released, you need to deconstruct those internal institutional blocks that you've built up, because you're no longer in an institution. And so you just simply began to dismantle those. But what absolutely made it easier for me was my own personal relationship with Jesus Christ through Christianity, and my wife. Because I got married while I was incarcerated. And my wife, she was just the absolute. In fact, we were talking just this morning, and I was sharing with her just how real mental health issues and post-traumatic stress issues are very, very real in my life. And if it had not been for my relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, spiritually, and my physical material relationship with this other wonderful human being, my wife, then I'm not sure where I would be or who I would be. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about addiction, that what's not stressed enough is the absolute need for the intimate connection with other people of humanity. There doesn't necessarily have to be the intimacy of marriage, but there has to be an intimacy where you can share the truthfulness of who you are internally with someone that you can trust, and they're willing to share the most intimate aspects of who they are with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long have you been sober now?
Oh, I've been sober now for, maybe 13, 14 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So what do you do, I guess, like on a daily basis to maintain that?
Okay, well, the first thing I do is I got to pray. I got to pray. I have to make an appeal to God every morning and committing myself to Him. I have to do that. And so that's the first step. And then the other thing is to have meaning in my life, purpose in my life. Why am I alive? Why am I living? What am I going to do today to enhance not only the quality of my life, but the quality of the lives of people who are intimately connected to me? And I think that helps me a lot, because I have a responsibility to remain sober, not just for myself, but because people are depending and committed to me. Not because maybe I don't they're not relying on me for their paycheck or something like that, but they may be relying on me for an emotional strength, a spiritual strength. While in prison, there was this awesome opportunity here in Findlay. You have the Weinbrenner Theological Seminary. And this theological seminary came into the prison. At this time, there were close to 50,000 inmates in Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. 50,000. And they said, out of these 50,000, we want 10 individuals that we can bring into this school, give them a theological education, and perhaps they can utilize their Christian enthusiasm with their now intellectual prowess and begin to transform the prison landscape. And so they came in, and I participated in this program, and I got my undergraduate degree in pastoral studies. And so I became a licensed pastor as well. And so I'm a licensed pastor, and I'm now continue to go to the same school upon my release, and I'm pursuing my Master's of Divinity. And so for me, it's a commitment to life that allows me to stay sober. And so life is so multifaceted, because right now, this interview, this is life. There's a connection being made between you and I, and the connection that you and I are making is reverberating, I believe, to the listening audience now. And there's someone who's going to be touched in a very deep way, in a very special way, as a result of what you and I are contributing to this space today.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, actually, how with the interviews, there's a certain connection that's made, and I want it transferred to the larger audience, but it is that. It's exactly the way you just put it. So what about your relationships now? You said you have a wife. You seem happily married.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about your relationship with your mother or siblings?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Relationship with my mother is wonderful. As I shared before, she's a born-again Christian, radically saved, sober, been sober for over 30 years.
Wow.
She's doing just fantastic.
That's amazing.
My sister, she still struggles with addiction today. And so, I'll tell you a short story, is that maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, my sister, she didn't call me, she didn't text me, she just sent me a cash app requesting money. And, and I know that she's struggling with addiction. And so, of course, I don't want to give her any money. But then I know that in this world, if I don't have money, then I have the commerce of my own self, and then she becomes the merchandise. And so now the struggle with me is, do I give her the money for merchandise, or do I allow her to barter and trade her own physical existence for the merchandise? And so I'm in a torn situation, because as a former addict, I understand that I will do what I must do in order to have what I believe that I need to fill this hole inside of me. And so I just laid in the bed and I cried. And I cried because I sent her the money. I sent her the money knowing what she would do with it. But I sent her the money because I know if I didn't send it, what she would do for it. And so when we live in this world of addiction, it's a world that people outside of it can look inside of it and believe that, well, why don't they just do this? And why don't they just stop? And why don't they just do this? But until you've had experience with what it means to be in a fit of addiction, then it's your grace, your mercy, and your understanding compassion that these people need the most.
Yep. So how long have you been out of prison now?
I got out June of 2020.
Okay. So what do you see for your future?
Well, what I see my future, my absolute end goal is to have a 24-hour cable station. And so, as you were sharing with me earlier about your internship, that's immediately the first thing that came to my mind. And I want everyone to be involved in that. Whatever program is happening at any particular hour is someone who has either been formerly incarcerated or formerly addicted to drugs. Because what I find most incredible, most fascinating is that the people who are successful after addiction, the people who are successful after being incarcerated, they're not doing anything that's exceptional. They're not doing anything that's special. Everything that's being done by them are things that were being done way before they even came around, and long after we're gone, they'll be doing it. But what makes it so fascinating, what makes it so incredible to me is the fact that you're doing it. Coming from where you've come from, what you have had to overcome, what you have gone through. If people really knew your story, there's no way in the world that you should be doing what you are currently doing right now. Anybody could do this who hadn't had the challenges that you've had in your life. But for me to just listen to a little bit of your story and to get some insight into who you are and the situations and circumstances that has forged and formed you internally, and then to see that you are successfully doing and accomplishing this particular feat, whatever that may be, that's the story. Yeah.
Very well put. I appreciate that. So what have you learned from your addiction?
What I've learned from my addiction is that there's no one who is beyond redemption. That's what I've learned. And I've also learned that some people who have never suffered from addiction can be some of the most cruel people.
I learned that too.
Yeah, they can be some of the most cruel people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the thing that I've learned the most is that no one is beyond redemption.
I absolutely agree. So do you have any words of hope that you would like to share with someone trying to get sober?
The word of hope that I have is this, is that you're in a place, and in this place it's dark. And in this place it's hard to hear. It's hard to understand. It's even hard to believe that anyone actually cares that you're in that place. But there are people that you know and people that you don't know who are looking for you as if you're in the bottom of a collapsed building. And they're not giving up until they get all the debris out of your life and find you safe and sound and restore you to life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for coming out and sharing your amazing, crazy, beautiful story in life. Was there anything that I missed to ask or anything you'd like to share other than what we talked about? Or did we cover about everything?
I think we covered it.
Yes.
I think you did a great job.
Thank you. I think you did a great job. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing and supporting on the road of recovery. We appreciate it so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.